republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you haven't signed the register in the back of the room, we'd appreciate it if you do so. Roll call of the board.
Mr. Jaramillo. Ms. Hernandez.
Present.
Ms. Quintero.
Present.
Ms. Dawn. Here. Mr. Crouch.
Present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo. Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. We have called the audience cards. I believe that we should be doing them for the main meeting, not
That's
for
for the
this
main
meeting.
meeting.
Yes, so I just want to make sure everyone was clear on that. Next, we have general functions. Organization, election of officers. I open the nomination for office of president. Ms. Quintero.
I would like to nominate Mr. Crouch for president, for the office of president.
Any other nominations?
Sorry, my computer's down, so I'm just kind of following
Okay.
what you guys are doing.
Is there a motion to close the nominations?
I move the nominations be closed.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo. Aye. Ms. Hernandez.
Aye.
Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Another motion?
Oh, you need another motion?
Yeah.
to-
We're not out of motions yet.
Oh, okay. So, it's like, we're done with president, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Ms. Hernandez.
No.
Oh, I move Mr. Crouch to be elected president of the Sunnyside Governing Board for the 2019 calendar year.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo. Aye. Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Thank you. Now we have the election of the clerk.
Just clarification. I heard calendar year 19. I think you meant
Oh,
calendar.
2020, 2019, 2020. Is that right?
No, it's 2012.
2020. I'm sorry, thank you.
Do we need to revote on that? Let's do it just for,
Okay.
go
I move
ahead.
Mr. Crouch be elected president of the Sunnyside Governing Board for the 2020 calendar year.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo. Aye. Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I rise.
Okay.
All right. Now we're opening nominations for the clerk of the board. Ms. Hernandez.
I nominate Ms. Quintero for the office of the clerk of the Sunnyside Governing Board.
Second.
Any other nominations? Someone would like to move the nomination be closed?
Move the nomination be closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
I don't get to vote?
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Okay. Now we need the motion.
I move Ms. Quintero to be elected clerk of the Sunnyside Governing Board for the 2020 calendar year.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jaramillo.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Ms. Quintero.
Aye.
Ms. Dawn.
Yes.
Mr. Crouch.
Aye. Motion passes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll start the main board meeting at 6:30.
So, there's some time.
You had the paper, right?
Again, if you haven't signed the register in the back of the room, please, we'd appreciate it if you'd do so. Roll call of the board.
Ms. Dawn?
Here?
Ms. Quintero?
Still here.
Mr. Hernandez?
Sorry, did you say me?
Ms.
Oh, I
Hernandez?
couldn't hear. Present.
Mr. Jaramillo?
Present.
Mr. Crouch?
Present.
Still.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move we approve the agenda as submitted?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Dawn?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez? Mr. Jaramillo?
Aye.
Mr. Crouch?
Aye. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is governing board comments. Ms. Dunn.
I just want to welcome everybody back from the break. I hope that you all had a very restful break with surrounded by your family and friends and enjoyed it very much, and welcome back.
Ms. Quintero.
Yes, welcome. I also want to congratulate a teacher from Sunnyside High School, Ladis Clark, who was nominated by her student and was recognized at the Phoenix Suns as Educator of the Month for January 9th in Phoenix. So congratulations. Hope she's here.
Ms. Hernandez. Mr. Jaramillo.
Ditto to what everybody else said. Welcome back. Hope you had a wonderful break. And I just want to say it's really heartbreaking being here this evening because of what's going to be part of our general functions discussion, especially when it affects a lot of our individuals that are employed here in the district, and they have been here for quite some time. And it's sad that we have to make the choices, not the choices, but the decisions that we have to make tonight. I hope folks don't take it personal, and it's a toughie. I've been affiliated with this district for 30 years plus, not as an employee or other capacities, and as a resident. So it does hearten me because I see what it's going to be doing to some of the people here. So it's sad. Thank you.
I want to welcome everyone to 2020. Happy New Year to everyone. Something that I think is somewhat apropos to what we're going to be doing tonight is tomorrow evening there will be a education funding forum to learn how the Arizona state budget and tax system works. It's going to be at the Santa Rosa Recreation Center from 5:30 to 6:30. It's put on by the Metropolitan Education Commission. Everyone is welcome, and hopefully there'll be some good insights on funding education in the future. This week it was last Friday, I went with one of my neighbors to enroll his grandchild at one of our schools. And I wanted to see the process, and plus he asked me to go with him because he was a little nervous about it. And I thought it was very interesting. The people at the desk were very helpful. They provided the packet of information. We got a tour of the school. But I found the process itself a little bit daunting. It's fine if you're familiar with all the information and you can pick up the form and look at it and, well, what do I do with the McKinney-Vento form? Well, I knew what McKinney-Vento was, but I wasn't sure what to do with the form. And he had no idea. And we went through the process, and we asked questions at the front desk. His daughter, who was filling out the form for her son, does not speak English, and she reads well in Spanish, but she didn't know what a lot of the forms meant. She was given the Spanish packet, and my neighbor, although he speaks well in Spanish, doesn't read that well. He doesn't understand everything in Spanish. So we actually requested an English document so he and I could read that and help her interpret what she needed to do. And I don't think we need to put those barriers in front of our potential students. And so I'd like to see us work on a process where we can find it easier to enroll students. I know one of our neighboring districts, Vail, does everything online, or not online, they actually give them computers to the parent that's doing it, and it guides them through the process. I had a niece that just went through the process, and she said it was very, very understandable and very easy. So anyway, I'd just like us to look at that as a possibility. Also, Ms. Quintero and I yesterday had a chance to tour some of our schools and look at the math labs. And you got to make sure that the valve is in there in the right place, the right one. But anyway, we got to tour a classroom at Los Amigos, a couple classrooms at Apollo, and 2 at Desert View, and it was quite interesting to see the way math is the way we're changing the way math is being taught. And I encourage any other board members to go on those tours and see how it's going. And I think we're doing a lot of the right things, I believe. So, but that's all. That's the only comments I have. So, Mr. Holmes.
President Crouch, members of the governing board, members of the audience. I'll start with our superintendent's report. Welcome everyone back to the new year. And the first item is our Bikes for Books. So last month, Tucson Lodge number 4 presented 8 bikes to students in grades 2 to 5 at Mission Manor Elementary to students who participated in the Bikes for Books program. 2 bikes were 2 bikes were for each grade were awarded, and each winner will receive a new bike helmet. Wesley Yandel, special education teacher in the exceptional education department, is the Bikes for Books chair for the lodge and chose Mission Manor to have the program this year. Congratulations to all the students who received bikes, and a big thank you to Tucson Lodge for this partnership and Mr. Yandel for his help leveraging that partnership. We have again a continued legacy of champions. Every year, Arizona Daily Star columnist Greg Hansen lists the top 100 sports figures in Southern Arizona. 6 Sunnyside High School athletes and/or coaches made the top 100 sports figures of 2019 list published in the Sunday edition of the Arizona Daily Star. Congratulations to number 78, Adrian Verhin, soccer player. Coach Anthony Leon, number 54 for wrestling. Number 50 was Manny Quiroz, soccer player who graduated. Number 39, Jesse Ibarra, wrestler, current senior. Number 21, Roman Bravo Young, who we all know, wrestler. And number 14, Coach Casey O'Brien, our soccer coach and athletic director at Sunnyside. So congratulations to all those individuals. I get a better picture of Mr. Coach Leon there. So, Maria, go take a picture of Mr. Leon. Yeah. Making her mark. So Sunnyside standout on Angelina Alcantar broke 1,000 career points in a 50 to 45 win over Empire High School. She is currently at 1,013 career points. Alcantara was named to the Flowing Wells All-Tournament team. So congratulations to that young woman. We have NAU Educator of the Month. I know Ms. Quintero brought this up. Lawrence Clark, Reese Clark, teacher at Sunnyside High School, was nominated by her student, Melody, to be recognized by the Phoenix Suns as Educator of the Month for going above and beyond to help students succeed. Ms. Clark was recognized at the January 10th game in Phoenix. When asked why Ms. Clark would be selected, Melody wrote the following. Mrs. Clark should be selected as the Educator of the Month because she is reliable, trustworthy, kind, and caring teacher. She helps her students with anything they need. She goes above and beyond to see her students succeed and will advise them about the opportunities they should take. She gives great advice to her students, especially if it's an opportunity for college and our future. She will seek her way into seeing the best in her students. She cares a lot about her students, not only in their education, but also on how they feel. She does her very best of being a teacher and does not give up on her students at all. She's the type of person to see the best in everyone. She's overall been my favorite teacher and will continue to be Mrs. Clark. Mrs. Clark deserves to be the Educator of the Month. She's a hardworking teacher and would love to see her students thrive. I think very kind words. Great job. We also have, again, Roman's back. Wrestler of the Decade. Roman Bravo Young, 2018 Sunnyside High School graduate, has been Wrestler of the Decade by All Sports Tucson. Congratulations to Roman and his work over in Penn State. We also have BMX Rider of the Year. Congratulations to Kevin Peraza, 2014 Sunnyside High School graduate, was named the BMX Rider of the Year award. So congratulations to Kevin Peraza, 2014 graduates. His younger siblings are with us as well there. Great bike warriors in their own right. We the People program, Rivera Elementary 6th grade Sun program. Students represented at the We the People hearings before the break. Rivera was the only elementary school represented for the region. The judges were surprised and very pleased with the students commenting on their knowledge, high-level reasoning, teamwork, commitment to study, professional behavior, and presentations. The Citizen and the Constitution program promotes civic competence and responsibility among the nation's upper elementary and secondary students. Congratulations to Rivera students. We have another MVP on and off the field. Congratulations to Julio Lema Santiago, a senior soccer player at Sunnyside High School, for being named MVP top field player in the Brandon Bean Soccer Tournament at South Point Catholic High School in early December. Julio made honor roll for first semester as in the top 10% of the class. So way to go, Julio. And lastly, we have our academic decathlon. So last Saturday, the Sunnyside Academic Decathlon team attended a full decathlon scrimmage at Desert View High School against 4 other high schools. Sunnyside brought home a few awards. Valerie Rios, varsity, second place in language and literature, and first place in social science. And Deborah Contreras, varsity, third place in speech. These students will go on to compete in the regional competition in Yuma, Arizona at Cibola High School on the 31st. A lot to celebrate, a lot going on in between the breaks, so thank you very much for a longer than usual superintendent's report, but we're celebrating our students and teachers. Thank you.
I think we need to applaud all of the students and thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you.
We have no recognitions tonight. Next, we have call of the audience. The first person is Barry Baker.
I just have a couple of questions, comments on the RIF that's going to happen that you haven't voted on yet. But I don't know about the high school people, but the middle school ISS, have you rewritten or are you in the process of rewriting the discipline matrix? Have you informed the parents of our students that this is going to happen, that there is going to be no in-school, it's going to be out of school? Or if you keep the in-school, who's going to watch these students? Who's going to take care of the ones that get kicked out of class for behavior just on a daily basis? On certain measures on that. It's the only couple of things I have on that. And a couple of people I've talked to with my security and a couple of my teachers, they think this is a vital resource that you're going to do away with, and they're not happy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Next person is Mary Acosta.
Hi, good evening. I have to read because I get too passionate otherwise. My name is Mary Acosta. I've taught music in Sunnyside School District since 1979. Over the years, I've addressed this board on numerous occasions, mostly speaking on the benefits of teaching our children fine arts. Not only things like developing fine and large motor skills and creativity, but also the qualities that fine arts instill in our children. Qualities that modern jobs are based on, like thinking out of the box, working as a team, knowing your role in a team, but being comfortable to take a chance, responsibility, dependability, self-assuredness, the ability to listen to others. Most of the times that I've spoken here, I was pleading to keep music programs during budget, slashing of budget costs. Those were the worst of the times among the best of times. The one common denominator in all my 41 years here in this district is that our students have always had fine arts. Fine arts is a part of our identity here in Sunnyside. I see the poster right up there that says fine arts. It's who we are, something our school district does because it's who we are. Right now, we're bare bones in the elementary schools at this point in time, but our children still have music and art. Our middle and high schools still have music programs that are considered some of the best in Southern Arizona, and our fine arts, and they have other fine arts classes they can choose if they're not musicians. So tonight, I'm taking a little different path than I usually do. I'm coming in before the fireworks begin. I know that you have hard budget decisions ahead. but I want to take a minute to go back and thank you for all the support you have given the fine arts programs for all of these years. And I want to thank you in advance for continuing to support the fine arts, for continuing to offer the fine arts to our students, and for keeping cuts as far away from the children as possible. With me tonight in the back row are some of my fellow music educators. As music teachers, we know that in the future, the district is going to need to pass another override in order to maintain our fine arts identity. So I'm here to tell you tonight that we stand together with you, and we're ready, willing, and able to do whatever it takes, whatever you need us to do in the next 10 months to ensure that our community votes to support an override in November, and we can maintain our fine arts identity here in Sunnyside. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane Cromwell?
Thank you for this opportunity. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I started violin in the 5th grade at Lineweaver Elementary School. I continued to study at Vale Middle School and Rincon High School and received a substantial scholarship allowing me to attend the Peabody Conservatory of the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. I continued to live, perform, and teach in Baltimore for many, many years. Public schools in Baltimore have gone without music and arts programs for over 40 years. I've seen firsthand how hope and humanity are in, let me start that again. I've seen firsthand how hope and humanity in entire communities and schools without music programs goes to sleep. The students in many of the schools of Baltimore City enduring the perfect example of this. In a world where we can easily feel bombarded with stories of splintering communities and of growing divides, the music classrooms at Sunnyside schools are a sanctuary where students are learning to listen to each other, to respond thoughtfully. They are doing this with the only truly universal language, music. One that gives them a voice where words cannot go. Since moving back to Tucson just 6 months ago to teach string orchestra at Sunnyside schools, I have been inspired by the students glowing from their experiences in Sunnyside music classes. I have felt hopeful because of the strong commitment Sunnyside shoulders to keep arts and music programs alive. Sunnyside has something going on here that truly sets an example for other communities in the country. We talk about student agency, about building strong community in our classrooms, with the goal of empowering our students to become inspired, fired up leaders of tomorrow. These leaders of tomorrow will need to know how to listen to each other and how to respond thoughtfully. They will need to know how to help build bridges in our divided world. We do not teach music to make more professional musicians, but to teach humanity. For what would our world be without it? Music is part of the fabric of who we are. It is part of our culture. It is not dispensable. Without having public school music instruction in my life, I would not be standing here today. Thank you.
Gabriel Holko? I can butcher names in any language. So.
I need to write more clearly. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Halko, and I am a string teacher here in Sunnyside Unified School District. This is my 17th year teaching, and I have had the privilege of teaching at many of our sites. including Lawford Middle School, where my friend Barry Baker is currently one of our very valued staff members. And I'm just going to make an aside, I would hate to lose him. He's so valuable to us. In any case, I am here tonight because I was invited by my friend Mary Acosta, who has been in the district for a very long time and has basically helped to carry us through, like she said, through good times and bad. We have so much to celebrate here. Jane Cromwell, who just spoke so eloquently and passionately, wow, it's amazing that we have attracted someone like her to come to our staff as well. One of the things that keeps me here in Sunnyside after 17 years is because I do feel valued. I feel that what I do matters. I feel that what we offer to our students here in Sunnyside is consistent and strong and beautiful. And we do offer a place where students belong. For me, I was once upon a time that 4th grade student who fell in love with the cello, heard it played by an orchestra teacher, was given that invitation to be a part of something bigger than myself. And here I am now, because back then I was much too, I would say, intimidated to speak, to find my voice. And I have found it. Sometimes it might quaver a little bit as I speak, but it's because I'm here to speak about something that I love and to speak on behalf of a community that I love. The students that we have here can rise. They can perform at levels of excellence that people in all other states can perform, but we give them the opportunity on a daily basis to practice their art and to learn more about themselves. And the speaking points that my colleagues brought up about learning how to work as a team and to push themselves beyond their natural limitations. We have, as Sunnyside ensembles, we've had the opportunity, thanks to your support over the years, to take our students to perform not just at the regional level, but also out of state on a more national level. Our orchestras and bands have been recognized in competitions such as Music in the Parks, where the judges have awarded us top honors, first place, superior. And they comment about how they would love to come and see our programs live and in person, and to see the beautiful work that we're doing in our classrooms and the level of respect. We actually have a reputation that goes beyond just our small community here, believe it or not. Many of our ensembles perform at the Arizona Band and Orchestra Directors Association festivals, and again, receive top honors, superior, excellent, superior with distinction. And so I want to invite you to please consider coming into our classrooms or coming to our concerts to hear our students perform and seeing them being a part of something greater than themselves and aiming for excellence in all that they do, not just the fine arts, but it does carry through. Thank you very much for your time.
Oscar Villa.
Good evening. I'm Oscar Villa. This is my father, Sergio.
Nice.
We just came in here to introduce ourselves. We'll be opening up a grocery store. Right here will be your neighbors. The building that was Citywide Produce. We have grocery stores in Nogales. I don't know if you're familiar with Villa's Market, but we'll be putting up a store up here. We will be keeping the name as Citywide.
Citywide Produce.
Down in Nogales, we're really involved with our community, so we're here to try to do the same. We know Nogales isn't the same as Tucson, but we like to have an impact on our community down in Nogales, and we want to try to do the same here in Tucson. So just wanted you guys to put a face to the building. If anyone needs anything, we're here to help. Right?
Our doors are always open. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to let everyone know that the board is not allowed to comment or respond to call of the audience. So if anyone is expecting a response, we can't give one from the dais. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Roll call.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is under general functions. It's proposed budget reductions for school year 2020, 2021. Mr. Holmes?
Hello, President Crouch and members of the governing board. I want to present from the podium so that I can actually speak to you more formally and actually be able to see the PowerPoint at the same time. I will be asking some of our directors to come up and actually give some clarification on particular topics, but it's a pretty extensive presentation that I felt would be more appropriate for me to do from the actual podium itself. I'll start by kind of talking through the process. As you're aware, we have an interest-based bargaining unit, which is known as IBB. That's made up of representation that's chosen by membership in each of our 3 associations, one being our Sunnyside Educational Association with President Ms. Tori, where she's right there, and her group, and they choose people to be part of that bargaining unit, as well as our president with Ms. Cassandra Brown from SCEA, which is our classified organization, who's here in the back as well, and then our administrative association, represented by we've got Mr. Ridge, who's I think here as well, and members of the interest-based bargaining team. And it's important for me to not only name the people because they're here present tonight, but because we work collaboratively with them to really make decisions when it comes to salaries, particularly these times where we come to cuts and coming before the governing board. It's important for us to speak with one voice because they are the structures that we have in place as a institution to make sure decisions are made collectively by all those that are represented by those 3 associations. So when I come speak for you tonight, these are all been approved through the interest-based bargaining process, which I'll continue to refer to as IBB, just so that the acronym is explained in a little bit of detail. But as we were reviewing all the site reductions, we really had to look across all areas of our district. And I just want to clarify that these reductions are not just because we didn't pass an override. The reality is we are an aging community and we are a shrinking community. This year alone, we lost about 300 students, roughly about 100 and change the year prior. If you look at the collective loss of enrollment over the last 7 years, we're looking at over 1,000 students. We will have a demographer come and present to the governing board in February a little bit more details on what that's looking like long term, but it's very similar to the trends we're seeing statewide, which is we are an aging state and we're very attractive for retirees. Housing is less expensive, and as a result of that, it is impacting our enrollment into schools, which directly impacts our budget. And I say that because the override would have helped offset some of these costs and potentially prolong some of the recommendations that we're making today. But the reality is if we're a shrinking organization, we need to staff our buildings in the way that we should be staffing our buildings based upon the enrollment of our schools. We do that pretty routinely as part of our staffing with teacher positions. We have not done that routinely in our staffing with classified positions. And quite frankly, this is kind of why we're having this conversation today, because now we're going to have to look at a staffing model that's appropriate and a programmatic redesign that's not associated with budget cuts, but it is associated with reduction in force because we're changing the way we do business in certain exceptional education programs as well. So what's being presented to you is a presentation that shows reductions in every single department across our whole district, to include site reductions. But once again, those reductions are a combination of not having an override, combination of drops in enrollment, and a combination of making programmatic changes that we feel in the best interest of students. And so these are the areas that we'll be discussing today in terms of site reductions, and then more importantly, department reductions. And I'll go through this presentation as well, and we'll take questions at the end once everyone kind of presents their pieces of this. I'll start by breaking it down into two sections. One is reductions that were approved through IBB on November 25th, and reductions that were approved on December 9th. And once again, these were conversations that have been happening with our IBB group for a number of months in preparation for what would happen with the override. So these were not surprises to our IBB. We've been talking about this for quite some time. The first reduction is our ABSS clerks across our system. The ABSS clerks were added when 4 years ago we reduced an out-of-classroom, our out-of-classroom person in each of our elementary classrooms are certified, who at that time we were facing similar reductions in force. So this was an additional classified position was added as we reduced our PIA positions, coupled with our folks that were helping support data and whatnot at our schools. This was a resource to help support that work. So this addition is being eliminated. It was added specifically to our elementary schools, which makes up, if you see, 12 of them. Ocotillo was not one that was added. We have 3 positions that are currently frozen when we implement the freezes, so it impacts 9 people there in that position. As we talked about in-school suspension, that is an area where we, like many of these, there are great positions that we need. However, at this point in time, we're going to have to make sure that if students are violating the current matrix, we look at ways in which each school can support some of those particular students. But at this point, having an in-school suspension program is not something that we can no longer support and afford to do. We're continuing our ATS program for long-term suspensions, and at this point in time, that's the program that we need to maintain right now, because those are students that are going to be out for long periods of time. We can't do both, not at this point in time. We can't afford both. Counselors are being reduced across the board, particularly as we look at our elementary schools who are under 500. So currently our model is every elementary school had a counselor. This last year we implemented a model, this is not new to us, where if you are under 500 you share an elementary school. Again, this is not new, but what's being here, that's why you see 2 frozen positions in some of these. But the reality is that some of those schools will be impacted differently. What we are doing is making sure that it's consistent across all of our schools. So Sierra and Gallego Intermediate, which has elementary school students, will be staffed like we would staff an elementary school under 500. So they will receive a 0.5 FTE that will be shared between the 2 schools in the counseling position versus 1 each, and then 1 for their middle school level. Every other middle level will have 1 counseling position, where we previously have had 2. In addition, our high schools have 6 current counseling positions and will reduce to 5 counseling positions. So for a total of 6.5 FTE. As you can see, there are some post-retirement, frozen positions, temporary, and someone that's about to retire potentially, where the impact may not be any actual person losing a position is moving on from they're losing a position, but they've been already retired. We have had a practice in this district to have substitutes for our classified positions in areas such as school safety, our monitors and custodians. So if one of those folks were out, we had a pool of subs that would come in and fill in on a daily basis. We are no longer affording to do that. So that means if a custodian is out, whoever's there in the evening will help cover, and someone in the morning will help figure out how they clean that particular area, or maybe it'd be just a trashing for that day. Equally, if there's a monitor out, then school's going to have to find ways to cover it. But to have a daily pool of folks subbing is not something we can no longer continue to afford to do. You had a list of folks that were let go as a result of being part of that pool of people that we approved last month. I just want to remind us that so this will be a continued elimination of cost associated with daily. And then lastly, we are our traditional IAs, which are paraprofessionals or teacher assistants that we've had in schools. We currently staff at a 1 to 500 ratio. We're moving that ratio to 1 to 200. That 1 to 200 ratio is resulting in 22 positions being lost. 14 of those, however, are frozen, so it really ends up being 8 people that are impacted by that currently. Again, these are all what was approved by IBB on November 25th as a result of discussions that we had, ongoing discussions, quite frankly. So there wasn't an event that happened November 25th. It was just coming to some decisions post-override and putting what we had consensus on at that particular point in time. On December 9th, we continue to have discussions around office staff. As you recall from my previous statements, our schools are smaller. As a result of being smaller, the amount of staff necessary for each of those buildings is being recommended to be staffed based upon a size ratio, which we didn't have really in place, not in that way before. So once again, if elementary school is under 500, they will also lose, in addition to their ABSS clerk, they will lose an office assistant. So that means 3 of our current elementary schools that are under 500, Los Niños, Summit View, and Rivera, will each lose an additional office assistant. They will be left with 2 people in the front office, an office manager and an office assistant. Every other elementary school will have an additional one. So the way we're looking at staffing currently is for every 250 students you have above the 500, you would get an additional student. No additional office assistant, no current elementary is over 750. Just to give you context, if those of you that have been on the board previously, you know we had many elementary schools that are over 800 at one point in time. That's no longer the case. As a matter of fact, now that we have 3 schools that are under 500, and many of them hovering between 500 and 600, just making the threshold for additional office assistant. In the middle school level, they currently have 5 office folks. They will be reduced to 4 office folks at the middle level. And the computer clerk is the one we are eliminating as part of that reduction. We're going to try to standardize the office assistant to be office assistants and not have all these subcategories in school. So we are going to align days with all these different people who had different days. We have people coming in prior to the principal coming in certain situation, which makes no sense at all, right? There may be some rationale in the past, but right now we feel like people have to be there when the principal's there, not necessarily in different points in time. So this will align that, both calendars and people in those positions. And the high schools will each lose, there are 2 comprehensive high schools, will all each lose 3 office folks, and our Star Academic Center will lose 1 office person. Categorically, what does that mean in our high schools? That each high school will lose someone in the office assistant category, someone in the attendance clerk category, and someone in the administrative assistant category. So there will be folks still in all those areas, and there'll just be 1 down in each of those categories. So that's a total of 15 FTE that's being reduced. We'll talk about process after I complete the reduction, how they're noticed, and then in what ways they compete back for their position. I must point out that the FTE at Star is a current frozen position. So the reality is there are 15 folks who are positions are being eliminated, but 1 is currently frozen. And as we're going through this process, there are a number of both retirements and resignations that make that a moving target, quite frankly. So final numbers on total impact probably won't come till later in the month, as both processes are happening and people are making decisions around their own retirement or staying in the institution. With monitors, we're having 7 monitors are being eliminated. We have one at the elementary level. We are being consistent that every elementary school will have one monitor. We had one elementary that had two. So that was where we're eliminating those FTE that were done not by any kind of district-wide strategy. It was just kind of relationships that people had at the time and keeping people there. By the same token, our 4 middle level schools will have, so Apollo, Laufer, and Challenger will each have 3 monitors. They've had 4 in the past. And Sierra and Gallego Intermediate will have 4. Part of that is staggered because they have elementary schools. They have to stagger their time of dismissal as well. So again, that's, and they're larger in size. And then the 2 high schools will go from 7 current monitors to 6. Let's say their high schools had 6 monitors for a long period of time. Were added over the last few years. We're going back down to 6 monitors as well. I got to remind us we also have, it's not the perfect system, but we have a proliferation of cameras across our system as well that helps with some of that. It's not the same as a person, but in terms of safety and figuring that out, that's part of our system. Our teacher coaches, those are the folks that are supporting teachers in the coaching realm. We are going to be moving all instructional coaches out of Title I and into our results-based funding for 1 year, with the exception of our high school teacher coaches. We will not be bringing high school teacher coaches back. We'll continue to rely in the system that's in place for supporting teachers, which is our lead teacher models that we have had in place, where we compensate individual teachers for playing that role, but not have someone that's out of the classroom coaching at the high school level. The results-based funding is money that's earned, as you've more recently heard from our governor, money for performance. We've had a number of schools qualify this year, and part of that funding can be used to support schools and replicating why these schools received the money in the first place. I mean, we know instructional coaches play a pivotal role in a lot of that, so we're going to use that funding for 1 year only. After next year, if an override doesn't happen, I'll be coming back to you here, and this would be a position we can no longer sustain. Great people who do wonderful work, but it's going to be a 1 year only, moving it out of Title I. And I'll explain why we're moving those funding sources out of Title I when I get to the final budget numbers. We are eliminating 1 nurse. Nurses all share buildings currently. This would then move into a model where 1 person will share the 2 high schools. And that 1 person has been notified who's a retiree. That's one of the high schools, so those high schools will be sharing a nurse. And then lastly, in our TAP program, with our Teenage Parent Pregnancy Program, we're limiting 1 classified FTE, and that maintaining the rest of the program at this point in time. But for right now, our commitment was to make sure that we had every single division within our schools see some sort of impact as a result of this. So these are really the school site level cuts that were approved by IBB on December 9th. I will continue with the departmental impact as well. I'll start with information technologies. You have a total of 5 FTE. I know Mr. Baca is coming up here. I'll let him explain more in detail, but those 5 FTE are not going to have a name associated with everything. It's a total of $225,000 in savings, which is a combination of folks that have retired, positions that he's eliminating, some reorganization and restructuring within his own department, to come up with what we're saying is 5 FTE, but in reality, it's around $225,000 in cuts as a result of his reorganization. Anything you'd like to add to that, Mr. Baca?
Well, just that, President Crouch and Superintendent Holmes, members of the board, this reorganization is more to reflect the way IT services need to be provided in 2020 versus in 2010. Some of our positions are titled and have job descriptions that are more aligned to an older style of infrastructure. And so we have modernized our infrastructure significantly, and we've standardized a lot of our systems. The type of devices that are supported in the classrooms are standard. So what that does is that brings efficiency as we accumulate years of experience around that. That brings a lot of efficiency, and what we've realized is as we've lost, approximately almost over 1,500 to 2,000 students over the last several years, we haven't had to have the same number of technicians to support that because of our increased experience and because of our efficiency in supporting those type of devices, and not just the devices themselves, all the systems that IT is designated to support. So last year, we actually instituted the beginning of this process last year when we had two technician positions resign, and I approached the superintendent and DLT, and I said, I don't think it's necessary that we feel that. We can rebalance with our existing staff because of the increase in our efficiency to absorb the workload, and that's balanced against our standard of support that we expect of ourselves and what our teachers expect in terms of timeliness and customer service. So we take that balance into consideration. Can we absorb it? The answer was yes. This year we are taking another additional two technicians in that same manner. One of the MCT technicians and another retirement is what's contributing to the 5 FTE. And we look at all the other portions, and we can continue to meet our standard of service while still reducing the number of technicians for all the variety of reasons I explained. The last piece I wanted to focus on was I mentioned at the beginning, modernization. What I want to do is split, due to personnel management needs, one of our existing positions is kind of a dual network administrator, IT, personnel manager, and I need personnel management because of the complexity of our network. I need that focus, and I need to split it off to a network administrator who is dedicated towards doing the technical side of managing our complex network. It's a modern network. It's complex, but I'm speaking in both terms. It's also a simpler network in a lot of ways. But I do need an individual who has specifically targeted at supporting the infrastructure in the modern design that we have that doesn't necessarily match the old job description. So for that reason, in this modernization, the network administrator position is proposed that we complete that position. This does not mean we're adding any additional bodies. We will fill that position from within the existing staff. So there's no additional staffing being added to the department. In fact, it's 5 less staffing that we will complete by the end of this transition. But I wanted to be clear with the board about when we see a job description such as network administrator, which currently exists, but being posted and filled internally, it's so that we can adjust our support systems to reflect our current design of our network. And the same thing applies to lead tech. So I know I went probably beyond more than what I need to, but excuse me? So yes, we have a couple other adjustments. Our Los Amigos librarian, because it is the Los Amigos Technology Academy, it historically had been allocated additional resources in the sense of a full-time librarian versus where all other elementary schools were required to split a librarian. A dedicated technician, whereas all other school districts were required to share a technician. We simply can't afford to continue to manage that model just because of all the other cuts necessary. So we have consulted with the principal and the affected individual and discussed that this is a proposal that has been made to IBB, and IBB supported us bringing this proposal to reduce it to a 0.5 FTE allocation, as all other elementaries have that same level of 0.5 FTE allocation. And lastly, our AV technician position is a position that is still necessary, but we can identify ways where we don't have to maintain the same number of work hours next year, and we can start to balance that workload with some of the other staff who have available technical support staff. And I've been working very closely with Mr. Powell and in his modernization of the security department. There are technicians who support his systems there. We can start to use their time to support and backfill the time we can save by reducing the hours on the AV technician. So when you add all those pieces up, you get 5 FTE, and you get a savings of $225,000. Thank you.
Thank you. I just need him to give a little more details because it's not as clear in the presentation. Public relations, we have one post-retirement individual in the copy center. Those are duties that are going to have to be absorbed internally through our internal offices. So again, public information is also reducing one FTE. Curriculum instruction, we've had a PD coordinator for a number of years. We froze that position just because we were preparing for what would happen in override. We will now eliminate that position out of Title II. coupled with one program specialist that's a post-retired individual who's very valuable, but at this particular point in time, we don't make sure that every single department here centrally is all shares in the budget reduction. Federal programs, we have one resignation, our executive director, that we are not going to be refilling. Though that cost is actually more than that. That goes into effect immediately. As well as our parents as teachers, we are eliminating $150,000 from that program. We will be left with $100,000 in our contribution to parents and teachers. We're not eliminating parents and teachers program. We are reducing it by $150,000, which means the following. Either we move administrative cost to the First Things First budget, which is currently funds the majority of our parent educators, or we have to reduce our parent educators as a result of this to get to the $150,000. The reason why it's an or is there's a lot more discussion that has to happen with the grants management of First Things to First to find out what we can move and what we can't. But that's still a reduction of $150,000 is what we're asking for approval today. We're reducing one HR specialist in our HR department. And in our operations department, we were reorganizing. We have a retirement in our transportation director. We will be hiring one director to oversee both transportation and maintenance. Our current assistant director has been invited to apply for that position. However, it's going to be an open process to determine who will oversee those two divisions. We haven't had one person overseeing those two divisions, I think, since the 90s. Quite frankly, it's going to be tough for anyone to do. It's realistically a real difficult decision, but we have to make impact at an administrative level as well. So we will have one person overseeing both departments to mitigate some of the day-to-day involvement in that. We will also be hiring a transportation supervisor, which will be a new position. So in essence, we will have a transportation supervisor in transportation, a custodial supervisor in maintenance, and then one director to oversee both programs. That's a reduction there. In the business and finance office, we will be eliminating one director in the business operations, a post-retirement individual. We will be reducing one payroll specialist, one accounts payable specialist, and two office assistants. So there will be three post-retirement folks in that office assistant area that will have been noticed, and then we will go through the process of hiring back one individual that's impacted in this division. You can see the savings associated with each of those cuts. I'll give you a total in a minute. We have our executive assistant for the board office who's retiring in May. We will not be filling that position until after we find out whether we, go after an override and whether we have an override or not. But like every division, I felt it was necessary, and I believe that the board office also has to take the same impact of reductions in every single department. This will be frozen. We will have a person from our business office help support that role here with the board functions moving forward until we're able to fill that position if and when. And lastly, we have a retirement. This is not news. Our assistant superintendent for student services is retiring. You all have been noticed of that as a result of her retirement, who should be sorely missed. We will be combining her roles and duties with our secondary schools officer to create a chief student service officer for savings, as you see here, elimination of assistant superintendent position for our divisions. And then lastly, we have our exceptional education program as well. We are reorganizing our mild intellectual disabled students program. I'm going to have Dr. Williams speak both the rationale, what that's going to look like, to speak to these cuts in particular, as you're seeing here, both the and the process by which she's thought about this particular programmatic change. I must say, if we're not the only ones, which I think we may be the only district left in Tucson that has a self-contained program for our mid students. I'll let her verify that statement. But the reality is we're moving towards inclusion models. You've seen some of the work from Sunnyside High School presentations before us. We have seen some great results as a result of that. Students will still receive support, and this is what I like Dr. Williams to speak about, how she's proposing this tonight, and more importantly, give you a little bit more details as we're making this decision.
Board President, Mr. Crouch, Superintendent Holmes, and board members, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about the thinking related to the changes in how we serve students with intellectual delays. This is work that I think has really taken place over the last couple of years, really looking at the performance of our students, how they perform in various settings, what their achievement looks like, and also the social emotional, as well as what happens when they leave our systems and what sort of experiences that they might be having. As Superintendent Holmes mentioned, really looking at also our neighboring districts, as well as I've got several colleagues in the Phoenix area when we talked about how they support students with intellectual disabilities and looking at much more inclusive opportunities for these students. And the research really shows that students like these students, as well as some of our other students who might be in other programs, benefit from those experiences that they have in the general ed with their peers and exposure to high, basically high standards, as well as high expectations for these students. So as I mentioned in this slide, we have currently 150 students in our K-12 programs who are in our self-contained programs. What we've discovered as I look at the students who are in high school, most often if they were identified at elementary or middle school and actually were part of the self-contained program, that's pretty much their experience until they graduate. Now, it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's how traditionally that was, how we provided services, because we really did believe that having those small classrooms was important for students. But what we're learning is that we really have to expand that, because I do believe the teachers do an amazing job, and that is an amazing group of teachers that we've been working with. So having that conversation with them was definitely tough, but I also am inspired by their motivation and also some of their thinking about how we can do things differently. One of the things that also was really critically important that we discovered, some of you visited our School to Work lab last year. We were funded to have a lab where students actually experience work type related components. And we discovered that a lot of our students struggled with reading or could not read. And for me, this is hugely important because students with intellectual disabilities can read and can learn to read. And we should be ensuring that they do leave our systems with those skills so that they can engage in other types of experiences beyond school and that post-high school experience. So with that said, this move to a more inclusive model really helped in some of that decision making. Part of that work we're looking at having 8 teachers who will be inclusion support teachers, and I encourage many of our teachers to apply for that, as well as the aid supports, that we would have a pool of 15 programmatic aides, or PCAs as we have labeled them in HR, the new job description, so I apologize. It's kind of a little bit of brain stall. And the plan is to look, currently we've looked at every student's homeschool, what that will look like at each of our schools, the kinds of supports that they will need. Working closely with my colleagues in curriculum instruction, they're also supporting some of this work by looking at collecting data related to academic, so reading, writing, as well as math. So it's been a huge lift, and I appreciate their support in going into the classrooms and working with our teachers to do some of this data collection so that we have a clear understanding that when our students are in their inclusive models, we want to ensure that they're engaged. The last thing that I would want, and I think we all believe, is that we don't want our students to be sort of isolated in the classroom, because that's another sort of things that you have to be aware of. And so having these inclusion support teachers as well as the programmatic aides available to make sure that there is that co-teaching or also planning with the gen ed teacher about what that looks like when we think about how the student demonstrates their knowledge. Or if, for instance, there's a reading chapter that's at the 8th grade level, then what does that look like for this student? You know, how we can take that same material and have it at a lower reading level or read to them and things like that. So there's a lot of work around what that looks like. The work that we've done at Sunnyside High School really has been powerful. When we see what our students are capable of doing, it just floors you. And the relationships that they've developed with their peers is just so powerful. All of us want to leave our school system with that opportunity to have peers and friends and experiences that you remember and you can reflect on. And so we're really seeing that as been a real positive with the work that Kate Street and Barbara have been doing over at Sunnyside High School and how we can model that in our other schools. So some of the work over the next 9 months really is about every month, what are we doing to help prepare our students as we make that transition. Okay. The next slide, sorry. The other two areas, first of all, the social workers, and this was a really tough decision because of the work that we're doing currently in our district and the supports that we need for our families and our students. However, one of the key pieces is really looking at and understanding the role of a school social worker and how they are a important part of our community as well as part of the entire team when we think about special ed and gen ed, and now we have mental health specialists that are out in our schools, and so we really need to look at their roles very closely. And so this opportunity is to really update basically that role and sort of the expectations of how they are integral parts and support each of our schools. We have enough data where we have a sense of the types of referrals that come into our office. That was a big thing that I really looked at collecting, and then what specifically are our families needing, and then how they also partner with the various school teams. So with that, it's really important that that role of a social worker does support the academic mission of our district. And so we had 4 positions, but we're requesting 2 to still stay in place with an opportunity for each of them to apply for that position. I do believe one of our social workers was looking to retire, so, but, you know, yet still I want to make sure that I consider each of them as applicants. And then the last one is elementary parapros special ed. At the elementary, historically, and this is something that many districts have done in the past, when you have your special ed teacher, and often if their caseload became a bit higher, on an average, a special ed teacher can have a caseload of approximately 20 students. Sometimes it goes higher or lower depending on that school and the dynamics. And so when it gets to a point where it's higher than that, then often you add aid support to help with students in the academic setting. When we look across all of our elementary schools, and from school to school it varies a little bit, but on average we have 2 resource teachers at each school, and their caseloads are about 20 students. And so because of our shrinking numbers and also the work around our school psychologists and some of the work we did in the past year and that we continue to do with teacher assistant teams and looking at tiered intervention, we're doing a better job of identifying students so that we aren't perhaps over-identifying or making sure that the students who are eligible for special ed should be in our special ed programs.
I have 100% confidence in Dr. Williams and what she brings forward. I gotta say that because these are tough decisions, but when an individual of her caliber is recommending and what she does to advocate for students on behalf of our district, she's built a lot of capital around knowledge that I feel very comfortable in bringing this recommendation to you. And then lastly, we have a reduction based on staffing. We do this every year. We're not changing our class size ratios, but this is what we anticipate based upon lower classes across the district, that we would have about 15. That number fluctuates as we're kind of finalizing numbers, but we're looking probably about 15 FTE across the board, K-12, based on just lower numbers. Again, the reason why this is important is it plays into people being noticed a lot. Well, again, we have a lot of temporary people, particularly who are teaching. Many times it's an easy fix site by site where you have a long-term sub and you're losing enrollment. That long-term sub goes in, and it's not that simple across every school, so we have to go through our whole analysis to know who's going to be impacted, but it looks like about 15 FTE. This is currently the budget shortfall for 1920. That's what we're dealing with now, and what we're looking at 2021. And you see some asterisks, and that really kind of clarify some of these numbers. As you know, Mr. Encinas will not allow us, nor can we legally, operate in the red and finish our fiscal year in the red. Therefore, to make up that particular dollar amount, we're going to have to burn through any kind of reserves we may have in the areas of unrestricted capital, Medicaid, and indirect funds. Those are funding sources that fluctuate year to year, but currently we have funding in there. I gotta make sure this is real clear. By eliminating those buckets this year, all we're doing is prolonging costs, because those costs aren't going away. We projected about over $3 million deficit for next year. That has now rose to 5.2 because we're not making the cuts this year. We have frozen positions, of course, like I mentioned before, and we've done away with the substitute kind of pool. That's not going to get us to the 2 million. So we have to burn through some of those reserves and then balance our budget at the result of that. But that's going to be a one-time only, which will result in us having to cut 5.2 for next year, which is what we're dealing with today in preparation to get to a zero budget for next year. We are projecting a 400 student lost in that particular budget that you see in 87 million. Also, we're making the assumption that we will be getting inflationary dollars. So if you see, why is there only $1 million difference, less than $1 million, or about a little over $1 million difference between the two budgets, is because we're anticipating new monies from the governor, and similar to what we've received in the past, we are assuming that we've eliminated the deficit, and we're assuming that we will be giving employees a step for next year as well.
We also wiped out the budget balance carry forward.
Yeah, that's the budget balance carry forward is no longer. We had up to close to 5 million. We're down to 0. So that's why budget balance carry forwards are essential as a district. And my recommendation is always to have a balanced budget carry forward. And so as we're looking at these particular cuts in the total, currently as being presented tonight, we're looking at a $4.6 million reduction in our maintenance operations budget and a $2.3 million reduction in our Title I budget. This is where my comment earlier comes into play. We need 5.2 million savings in M&O. We do not have that currently. Right now, as of this week, we have got tentative approval from Arizona Department of Education to fund all day, the half of all day K that we fund of M&O that's not funded by the state out of our Title I budget. I'll say that again. The state only funds Title I currently at half day. Our district has chosen to fund it out of M&O, so we continue full day programs. That additional half is being recommended to be moved into Title. This is why we are cutting our Title budget by so much. I need the space in Title to fund the all-day K, which would then give me a $1.3 million savings more into M&O, which will bring that total savings in our maintenance operation to about $5.9 million. That makes sense? Is that clear, right? The additional 1.3 that we will be moving from M&O to Title, where we have the capacity to do so, will result in our maintenance maintenance and operations budget being a total reduced by roughly $5.9 million. I am not here to give you a one-to-one matchup to the $5.2 million deficit, because that fluctuates, and quite frankly, I'd rather cut more to have some little wiggle room, as we know numbers change throughout the year. And that's going to be the results of what we're asking you to approve tonight. I'm going to have Dr. Bergman come up as well and talk specifically to the process pieces.
Mr. Holmes, I'd just like to bring up the point that we also have had an increase in minimum wage this year that has impacted us, and we've had compression issues with that as well. So that's
Yeah.
also negatively impacting our ability to meet the budget.
Yeah, and as you can see in these assumptions and the budget shortfall with the deficit and the expenditures that we're projecting, this does not address compression at all. All it does is help us deal with the minimum wage increase, but there's no compression being addressed in this particular budget.
Could you explain compression for the audience?
Yes, and compression means that as minimum wage has moved from the 8 to 10 to 11 to $12 an hour, we have not adjusted, we have adjusted everyone's salary appropriately, but that means some people are starting first-year employees making either the same as an employee that's been here for a long period of time, or in some ways just pennies on the dollar less. Again, it compresses the salary schedule so that people that have been here for a long time are not are being disproportionately recognized for their years of service. But again, I got to remind us, we do not receive additional dollars from the state to deal with the minimum wage increase. The expectation is that individual school districts figure a way to reduce their budget to address it, and then like the for-profit sector, they can raise prices, right? We don't sell goods, right? So we have to reduce our budget to deal with that. Dr. Bergman will speak to what the process would look like as a result of this vote tonight, so that we can make sure you're understanding how people then reapply for positions, what's left. I have to say this, not every position that's being reduced will have a spot to go back to. I just got to make sure we do not have enough vacancies in our organization, so there will be people whose positions will be eliminated, will not be coming back. But how they're noticed in the process will be discussed right now.
Good evening, President Crouch, members of the board, Superintendent Holmes, and members of the audience. Ms. Emsley and I are going to go over the 3 slides we attached so we can walk you through the process that we're going to put into place for our employees who have received notices that their positions could be possibly be eliminated, and the steps we're going to take. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Emsley. She's going to start off, and then I'll take over.
Good evening, President Crouch, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Holmes, and members of the audience. I'd like to start out first by saying that the Human Resources Department takes this whole process extremely seriously. We've had conversations with all members of our department about empathy, confidentiality, a transparent process. And so as I walk through this, I just want you to know that we keep that in mind throughout this whole entire process. To begin, we provided a preliminary notice to the employees affected by the reduction in force on January 9th. That notice was provided to the principals, and it was hand-delivered to every employee. Every employee had to sign off on a sheet and then return that sheet back to Human Resources. That information that was provided basically stated that we were going to bring this plan to the governing board to recommend to eliminate their position. And then on January 28th, which Dr. Bergman will be going over pretty soon, is when we will be providing the next notice pending governing board approval. During this notice also, there was a description of the round 1 and round 2 hiring processes, and Dr. Bergman will be reviewing those processes also. We've attached a copy of the letter to the presentation, and I believe that we can bring that up at some point in time too, for review. The other notice that we're going to be presenting pretty soon to our post-R and ESI classroom teachers will be sent out on or around January 16th this week. This notice is going to be a description of the process for the post-R and temporary teacher, classroom teacher postings of their positions. So these employees will be sent to the board on January 28th
28th to non-renew their position, and then we will be posting their positions on January 29th in order to be able to advertise them for the round 1 hiring process. Any positions that aren't filled during the round 1 hiring process may be eligible for placement for the district-initiated transfer process for all certificated teachers who are entitled to that through board policy. Anything else? Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go on to the next slide. As Ms. Emsley shared with you, the notice that the individuals received discussed round 1 and round 2 and explained to them explicitly how the process will work with rehiring. Once the board makes that decision, you make the decision tonight, and then when we bring to you on the 28th, the individuals who fill those positions, and that has to be, that information then has to be delivered to the employees on the 29th, which makes it official about who is going to be terminated in the sense of losing their positions. Once we have that information, and that will go to the effective employees of the temporary contracts and ESI and PostR, and then anybody who already received their letters for the elimination of position. Once we have all that information, those jobs will be posted. I've been asked numerous times, well, how many you're going to have? I don't know exactly how many you have. Tomorrow we are sitting down and going to be looking at EPARs, because as individuals retire, as temporaries positions get, EPARs get sent to us, we can then start calculating and figuring out exactly how many positions we will post for each of the job areas, classified, certified, professional, non-teaching. And we'll have a better number when we come January 28th of exactly how many postings we'll have up. And then the individuals who will participate, the number of individuals who will participate on that February 1st hiring round. People keep referring to it as a job fair. This isn't a job fair. This is a hiring process for the individuals who receive notification that their positions have been eliminated. And I've already gotten an email from several people who go, can we come to your job fair? And I'm like, no, this isn't a job fair. All vacancies will be internal, only for our employees who receive those notices. Our employees will only be required to fill in a one-page bid form. It was sent to all principals electronically in Ms. Gallegos' newsletter, and we will send it again necessarily if principals request it for their employees, whether they're classified or certified. And we are specifically encouraging any classroom teachers certified who received a notice to give them the opportunity to make a choice. And then if they get picked up in that round 1, they will have a position that they want, not necessarily being told, well, here's where you're going to be district-initiated transfer to. So we want all of them to have the benefit of that. We're going to create centrally the February 1st process, and the only groups that will be eliminated are the temporary, are the temporary and ESI PostR. They will not participate in round 1. And the reason why is because for the temporary, policy states after July 1, if you are hired, you have to wait. And then our ESI PostR are year to year as well. And so because of the number of DITs, we want to ensure that we have placement for our continuing teachers for round 2. So between round 1 and round 2, we have about 4 days. And in those 4 days, HR is going to be busily placing anybody who is a certified employee into a position where there'll be district-initiated transfer, so that they're ensured to have a position. And those are the teachers who did not get picked up in round 1, or chose not to interview for round 1, because they can also make that decision. Once they're placed, then we again go back to the table and we look at everything that's open, anything that's come in since then, because between February 1 and February 7th, things can shift. People, again, can choose to retire, leave the district. There are a number of reasons why we would have a vacancy. We will repost all those vacancies for round 2, and then we are not going to have a second central job experience. We are going to have the sites then interview for their positions, and whether they're classified or certified or professional non-teaching. So between the 7th and the 14th, site leadership teams will interview for their positions that are posted on February 7th. Is that clear? Questions? Okay. Does that kind of make sense? Mr. Holmes?
Mr. Holmes?
I just want to make sure, the February 1st, again, is all internal impacted employees interviewing just in their department or sites where they've been impacted in those. But it's a kind of a courtesy to really try to kind of hire back those that are have been impacted. And then on the second, we will open up. I got to clarify something as well. What the vote is tonight is to approve these particular cuts. The 28th, you're approving names in a consent agenda based on, there's not an additional request that I'm asking from the board. We're ratifying this particular vote tonight by then bringing the names forward. The reason, again, we cannot bring you the names tonight is you haven't voted on this particular proposal. So the next board meeting, all the names of the people that have been noticed would then come forward, and then they go through the process, and then they would come back in the following agenda if they were hired back. The disruption currently is that everyone that received a notice will be also on a board agenda saying that their job will be eliminated. That creates a lot of anxiety in the organization. But that's what's coming before you on the 28th. Not for changing necessarily the vote on what you do tonight. It really is just to approve the names so that we can then go through that February 1st process with the appropriate positions being advertised internally for bidding process.
And just to also remember that classified employees will be interviewing at their site for positions that are open in their site only. Classroom teachers, though, who have been noticed, can interview at their site if there's openings, but also other sites if there are vacancies that they're interested in. Those are the two differences. And again, ESI, post-R, and temporary and external candidates can only participate in round 2 once we repost February 7th. And they have that span of time between the 7th and the 14th. But I think we covered it.
That's the
two,
presentation for the governing board for comments, questions, or move on the vote.
Any questions from the board? Ms. Dawn?
Just on this very last statement you said, and I think I understand the reason. So we're having, at different times, different round ones, only internal.
Yes.
And then on February 7th through the 14th, external people can also
Yes,
apply.
external people can also
And at first I
apply.
wondered why are we doing that yet, if we're not quite ready with the others, but I understand. We still need to do external because, all the external people will go elsewhere.
Correct.
If by then we don't have somebody in place.
That's correct. And we don't want to end up with a shortage.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we pull in external for those positions, especially, we've always looked at SPED, but with the mid teachers being cut, we're hoping some of them will fill some of our positions that have been hard to fill because they have the different endorsements or they qualify for different pieces. So that's why we want to look at them in round 1 to see what we have left by round 2 before we bring in external people.
So there's a really good chance that, as far as certified are concerned, there more than likely will be positions for them, and that's why we. But there'll be more than enough positions for them, and that's why. But we want to make sure first that we have them fit into the positions that they prefer, that they want to go towards, and then on the 7th to the 14th, open it up for any spots here and there that we might need. Maybe a math or a science or something like that, and we don't want to lose that teacher because it's already difficult to getting, some of those special needs teachers and also and stuff.
Mr. Holmes?
I just want to clarify something, Ms. Dong. It's based also upon the DIT certification. So I just want to make sure not every single person may have a spot if there's not a position that they're highly qualified for. Okay, just in the certified realm.
Right.
Right, so it is based upon their current certification and the vacancies that are available in those particular certifications. We will still continue to work with individuals, but I can't guarantee that every single one would find a spot as a result of this. Particularly as we're going through highly qualified in areas where we need the expertise.
And we'll be working on that. We'll start pulling those individuals and looking at their certification so that we can then help them before that round one.
Are we asking questions throughout the presentations or just for this?
Yes,
particular-
throughout the presentation.
Okay, so I had a couple of quick questions on, or rather, one statement, one question. On the LD Resource Parapros, let me see if I can get to that one. LD Resource Parapro Elementary, 13 FTEs are going to be eliminated, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Ms.
And then I take a look at the other side, it says third phase of reductions previously reduced, 3 vacants and 10 reductions. So that, those are the 13, but does that mean that every FTE, every LD resource parapro is eliminated and there won't be any more?
So,
Or are there others?
right, so they're the parapro sped LD resource paraprofessionals that we have at the elementary level. So those would be the ones that would be reduced.
Okay, just
Yeah.
wanted to make
Okay.
sure there were like 2 there and we're reducing to 1. We're reducing every
We're just,
single one.
yes, and in most cases, there's, one at each site, but there are a couple of situations where it was more.
And then the only other one is more of a comment as far as the social workers are concerned. I understand, we're going to have to do all these reductions and stuff, and so I think we just need to really be diligent about looking at our community resources that are out there and seeing who can help us fill in some of those, because we do need social workers. We have a special population in this district that could really use such a variety of help that our social workers were providing. And so if we have to eliminate some of the social workers because of this reduction, I understand the needs for these reductions, but I think we need to really be out there looking to see how we can make connections with the universities, not just the La Fronteras, but people like the universities that have students that are going through, a variety and need their hours.
Right.
Maybe we can do some connections with them. We do it already with education. I think that if we could do it with some of the other colleges that are out there at the universities, not just the U of A, but of course ASU, who has a College of Social Work, and we can maybe tie in with them. And with other organizations, besides La Frontera, universities, but others that are out there that are wanting to come into the school districts and see what we can do to help get them, into our districts and helping our communities with such a variety of needs that they have.
Mr. Holmes?
Just, if Dr. Williams can just comment on this as well. We didn't really mention it here, but we also have the AWARE team, and there's a social worker as part of our AWARE team. And that was part of a social worker that was part of our team. So that, I'd be remiss if I don't add that, because in reality, we do have another social worker that's going to be supporting our schools as well as part of our AWARE team. So even though we are reducing, I want to make sure that we know that there's also another resource that we failed to mention specifically in that. I don't know if you want to make a...
And on the AWARE team, I'll just add to
Two-
that.
two
So
social
there are 2
workers.
social workers, and one of them is actually a licensed clinical social worker. So exactly what you're saying, Mrs. Dong, about maybe looking at the university, if there are students in like a bachelor's or a master's level program who need to get those hours, we would have that capacity to perhaps do some of that supervision, based on kind of their responsibilities. So, thank you.
Other questions from the board?
Just have a comment that
Ms. Quintero?
I just want to say thank you for all the hard work. This was hard, and it was traumatic for me to read it, so I know it was traumatic for you to put it together, because this is a lot of work and very well thought out, so thank you.
Ms. Dong, do you have
And just
something?
really quick, taking a look at the IBB-approved items that we had at the very beginning, the ABSS clerks and the in-school suspensions and all of those kind of things. I know that we're going to keep our long-term suspension program going, and our in-school suspension right now we're not. And the question I guess came up is that, do we have some metrics and thoughts in place of what we will be doing? And will that be brought forward to us as to somebody gets suspended in school or suspended? And what we're going to be doing with those students, or is that something that's going to be brought to us at a later date?
Yeah, we'll bring back some thoughts that we have on there. The reality is that we probably will see suspensions move and the day-to-day go up as a result of this. And that's, I'm just being honest, I cannot sit here and say that day-to-day suspensions that are not long-term will not be impacted by that, because that was mitigated by that. However, we'll look at what other resources each school may have to be able to kind of mitigate some of that. That will be brought at a later date. Yeah,
And I also want to thank everybody that's been involved in putting together these plans, as well as all the personnel that's involved with IBB. And I know that it was difficult decisions also for IBB to sit there and to try to figure out some of these things and what to do as far as their fellow coworkers are concerned. And also want to thank all of the administrators that have been involved. And this is very difficult. This is very, it's really huge. It's impactful. Monday, the governor said they were going to close the Florence prison. Everybody over there in Florence is just like, what's going to happen to us? But it's not just the employees, it's also the inmates. So I'm sure that our students in our community, knowing that these cuts are coming, are also concerned and also stressed and worried about what is going to happen. So I appreciate that you guys work so hard to do this so quickly and bring it to us so that we have this time frame available to help the employees take a look at what all is really going to be happening, with plenty of time to, try to make some decisions for their personal lives, for their families. So appreciate, this very difficult situation here, that it was brought forward to us in a quick way, and that it was today's main focus. It's not something that we're just, but that this is the main focus of today's board meeting.
Mr. Hamel?
Yeah, it is very, very tough. I did what Ms. Dong mentioned. Is there something in place for the employee that is totally confused still when they receive the letter? Maybe it was a little kind of a rude awakening for them. That is there a number that they could call so maybe somebody can sit down with them and explain it to them?
Absolutely. Principals, as well as the letter, inform that they could always call the HR department and either speak to their HR specialist or Ms. Emsley or myself. So we can walk them through and explain to them.
Cordially walk to them? I mean,
yes, to help them understand what it is that's happening, what their options are, what it is they can do. I've met with several individuals already who wanted to know, well, what if I wanted to retire? What would that look like? Mr. Encinas has met with some individuals. One of the things that in the process, we know we're going to have people who come on February 1st who said, I forgot to do a bid. We already have thought that through and know that we're going to have stations set up with individuals so that they can do their one-page bid, so that we can get it to the appropriate administrator and make sure they have the opportunity to interview for openings at their site. And also reminding principals to remind their staffs and sending out continuous reminders about February 1st and what it is they need to do. So it's in our plans to continually remind and to come see us if they need to talk and have a one-on-one conversation. As Ms. Emsley shared with you and how she started out our part, this has been extremely difficult and we all take it to heart. And I've been in the district for
Couple years.
too many years, and I think this has probably been one of the most difficult pieces that I've had to lead in HR and working with curriculum instruction and Mr. Holmes and the whole district leadership team on and IBB, facilitating IBB and working through this process. So we absolutely want to ensure every employee who received this notice knows their options and humanely understand what their options are.
And if they have a language barrier as well?
Oh, we have enough Spanish speakers in HR to help us.
And for the ones that can't totally really fill out a
Decipher,
bid?
yes,
for 'em?
absolutely. You know, if it, typically, one of my Spanish speakers sits in with me or Miss Emsley, and we go through it. Because a lot of times they can understand in English, but we want to point out in writing what it states and what it means in Spanish.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hernandez?
I just want to piggyback off of what Mr. Jaramillo said. When I sat with Mr. Holmes, these, of course, are really difficult decisions, and we're not having fun doing this at all. But it was a concern that I also think it's really important because I'm looking at the district hiring events. If I wasn't sitting here, I probably wouldn't understand what that meant. So we do need to make the language and how we communicate and when we communicate it more accessible to folks. And that was a concern that I also had. Because I want to we do know there's people behind these positions.
Correct.
Who have dedicated a lot of time in our districts and brought a lot of value. So we want to make sure that we treat them that way. So thank you.
And that they have that opportunity to put a bid in and to understand what they can do in the future. Okay, so thank you.
One of the most difficult things, or one of the most exciting things we do as a board is we get to take credit for our students graduating. We get to stand on stage and shake the hands of our students as they graduate. It's a really positive sign. It's the results of all the efforts of all of the employees of the district and for 12, 13 years. And finally the student graduates and we get to stand up there, shake their hands, and feel really good about it. It's a really positive thing. This is one of the most difficult things. All the board members, I think, would agree that this is one of the most difficult things we have to do. We really appreciate the efforts of DOT, of the IBB team, of the superintendent, and everyone that has stepped forward to bring this to us. And again, these are not easy decisions. They're not fun. I think all of us have probably had a heartache all week, and we just want everyone to know that we take it extremely seriously. And one of the things that all of us wanted to do was keep cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. We know it's going to impact our students, but directly in the classroom, it impacts them even more than any place else. So I think the recommendations have been very positive in terms of keeping them away from the classroom and having the least impact on our students. The most important thing we do is our students. If it's not for the students, none of us should be here. And so I think it's the proposal's in the right direction. So thank you. Any other comments from the board or questions?
No.
Does anyone want to make the motion?
No.
Oh, are you gonna ask for
Huh?
future agenda items first?
We have to make
No.
we have to do
No.
Make a motion on this.
We gotta move.
Yeah, we can't get past this one.
I was trying. Okay.
None of us want to do it.
I'll go ahead. I move that we approve the 2021 school year budget reductions, programmatic changes, and staffing model as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Strong?
Yes.
Ms. Quintero?
Aye.
Mr. Hernandez?
Aye.
Mr. Jaramillo? Mr. Crutch?
Aye. Motion passes. Are there any suggestions for future agenda items? Ms. Hernandez?
I would like to bring up for the next board meeting to go over a responsible contractor ordinance, go over the checklist that we have in place for vendors.
We'll bring back something based upon some review with all of us.
Recommendation, Judge.
Any other suggestions for future agenda items?
I'd like to make a recommendation that, or ask. I know that our attendance policy is in place right now, but what I'd like to see is how our attendance is with our employees, especially on Fridays and Mondays. That I've basically been, I think, as I've gone to different schools, and sometimes there's quite a few teachers missing from staff and other members. You know, that's a cost to the district as well, because we have to hire subs. I'd like to see what that is. I'd like to see what it's actually costing us for the post-retirement of the employees that we have in place now throughout the year. What else? I'd like to see if we can have Tucson Water be placed on the agenda for this upcoming meeting in 28th of January.
Okay, we've got a fairly full agenda for the next time. Is there a possibility?
Well, sometime in the near future, because they do have a report, upcoming report that's going to, tomorrow the meeting with UCAB, and it's going to be pretty interesting. EPA is going to be their guard, all the responsible parties, but they have another issue to focus on tomorrow as well, and I'd like to invite them to give a presentation on what was discussed. And that's it.
That's it?
Thank you.
Ms. Quintero?
Sorry. I just would like to see, like, maybe in a Friday report, the update on how transportation has been doing their scheduling, things like that. Oh, did I forget one?
Any other future agenda items? Would anyone like to make the motion?
We could adjourn.
Second.
Roll call.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight.
You guys forgot one.
Did I miss it?
You did.